You've felt it, haven't you? That unbearable heaviness inside your chest when everything around you is calm but your mind is anything but. You lie in bed and your thoughts crawl in like a swarm of locusts. Regrets from yesterday, fears of tomorrow, things you should have said, things you wish you hadn't. You replay the same conversation 100 times, and each version ends in more doubt, more shame, more inner torment. You try to breathe, but your breath feels borrowed. You try to rest, but your rest feels like guilt. This isn't thinking. This is self-destruction disguised as logic. And the more you do it, the more you become addicted to your own suffering. This is not life. This is a slow death in the prison of your own mind. But what if you could take back control, not by escaping the storm, but by learning how to stand still inside it, untouched, unshaken, untamed? Because that is exactly what the ancient Stoics mastered. They didn't just preach philosophy. They forged it in the fires of pain, war, betrayal, and death. They didn't seek comfort. They sought clarity, and they found it in the eye of chaos. If you stay with me through this video, you won't just learn how to stop overthinking. You'll awaken a deeper version of yourself, one that cannot be broken by circumstance or enslaved by fear. You'll learn to master the battlefield within, and if this voice inside you is already whispering, "Yes, I want that," then subscribe now. Because this is just the beginning of a deeper journey, one that doesn't end here. In the next video, we will dive even darker, where emotions no longer control you and you finally learn what real power feels like. But first, let's begin. Or we overthink because we believe we can solve everything, that if we just think a little harder, play the scenario a few more times in our minds, we'll finally reach peace. But this is a lie our ego tells us to keep us busy. Overthinking is not analysis. It's not preparation. It's the mind's last-ditch attempt to control what it was never meant to hold. You think you're being productive when you're just drowning in possibilities. You think you're being cautious when you're actually building imaginary prisons. And every time you try to figure it all out, you're really just pushing away the stillness that Stoicism demands. The Stoics knew that our desire to control outcomes is the very root of our suffering. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But how many of us actually believe that? Most of us spend our entire lives trying to manage things that are fundamentally outside our hands. Other people's opinions, the future, the past, death, love, loss. And in that pursuit, we lose what we do control, the clarity of this moment, the discipline of thought, the direction of our own character. Overthinking is a false god. It seduces you with the illusion of progress while keeping you trapped in paralysis. You sit there hour after hour, dissecting one small event like your entire life depends on it. But life is not a chessboard, it is a battlefield. And on battlefields, hesitation is death. The Stoics trained themselves to see what truly matters, and that clarity gave them speed. Epictetus taught that there is a clear boundary between what is within our power and what is not, and wisdom lies in not confusing the two. When you overthink, you blur that line. You believe that if you suffer now in your mind, you'll suffer less in reality. But that's not how it works. The pain you imagine doesn't protect you. It just steals your present. And ironically, the more you overthink, the more fragile you become. You lose the muscle of action. You become emotionally flabby, mentally bloated, spiritually exhausted. You cannot think your way to courage. You must act your way into it. So how do we stop? Not by turning off our thoughts, but by confronting them. You don't defeat the storm by running. You stand in it and choose your response. The Stoic path is not about denial, it's about discipline. It's about radical self-ownership. You train your mind like a warrior sharpens his blade, with precision, with patience, with purpose. You learn to question your thoughts. Is this useful? Is this mine to control? What does this do to my peace, my focus, my duty? And if the answer brings more fog than clarity, you drop it like a burning coal. That's not avoidance, that's strength. Most people think that reacting is strength, that obsessing means caring. But to a Stoic, the one who remains unmoved is the one who has mastered his inner citadel. Remember what Seneca said, "He who suffers before it is necessary, suffers more than is necessary." We are not here to suffer needlessly. We are here to see clearly, live simply, and act courageously. This is only the first door, and behind it is the brutal truth that most people are terrified to face, that they are the source of their own torment. But if you're still here, it means something in you is ready to go deeper, ready to step into the discomfort that breeds real transformation. In the next chapter, we'll enter the battlefield of emotions and uncover why controlling your feelings is not repression, but liberation. Don't stop here, and let's walk the path most men are too afraid to take. You were taught that emotions are truths, that if you feel something deeply, it must be real. But the Stoics knew better. They knew that emotions are not instructions, they are tests. Each feeling is a signal, not a command. Anger, fear, jealousy, doubt. They arise not to control you, but to reveal you. They expose where your attachments lie, where your insecurities hide, and where your illusions begin. The problem isn't that we feel, the problem is that we obey. We let a flash of anxiety dictate our decisions. We let a wave of sadness become our identity. We allow momentary emotional weather to shape permanent consequences, and we call that being human. But the Stoic doesn't see it that way. The Stoic sees emotions as visitors, welcome to enter but never allowed to rule. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." That is the essence of inner power, to feel fully, but remain unshaken. Not cold, not numb, but grounded, sharp, awake, in control. The weak man is a slave to his emotions. He screams when he should listen. He runs when he should stand still. He avoids when he should face. But the Stoic, he reverses the pattern. He watches the rise of anger and asks, what is it protecting? He sees fear and asks, is this real or imagined? He feels envy and questions, what does this tell me about my values? This doesn't mean he lacks emotion. It means he commands them. The battlefield of overthinking is littered with people who lost the war to emotions they never understood. They drowned, not because the tide was high, but because they didn't know how to swim through it. Emotions are waves. They rise, they fall. The Stoic is the rock beneath. When you begin to separate yourself from the emotion, when you can name it, dissect it, examine it like a surgeon with a scalpel, you begin to strip it of its power. The more awareness you bring to it, the less it controls you. That is not detachment. That is mastery. A man who knows how to sit inside his discomfort without being driven by it, that man is untouchable. That man is free. If you've ever broken something good in your life because of a temporary emotion, if you've ever said something you regret, chased someone who hurt you, or walked away when you should have stood tall, then you know the cost of emotional ignorance. And if you're still here, listening, breathing, questioning, then you're not here by accident. Something in you is waking up. The man or woman you were before was reactionary, but the one emerging now is deliberate, disciplined, and dangerous to anything that seeks to control them. In the next chapter, we'll go even deeper, into the darkest emotion of all, fear. Not the kind that makes you shiver, but the kind that keeps you small, quiet, and unseen. Because that fear has been running your life for far too long, and it's time we face it. Fear is not always loud. It doesn't always shout or break doors or leave bruises. Sometimes fear is silent. It hides behind your logic. It wraps itself in rational excuses. It pretends to be caution, wisdom, responsibility. But it's none of those things. Fear is the voice that tells you, wait, not now. You're not ready yet. It convinces you to stay in the job you hate. It whispers that you're too broken to be loved again. It chains you to people who've already left you emotionally, just because you're terrified to be alone. Fear makes you dress up your prison as a comfort zone, and then it asks you to decorate the walls. But the Stoic doesn't dress fear in excuses. He strips it naked and stares directly at it. Because fear, once exposed, is powerless. Seneca warned, we are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And it's true. Most of our suffering happens before anything even goes wrong. We write entire novels of pain in our heads before a single bad page occurs in real life. That's not living. That's emotional suicide in slow motion. And if we don't confront it, fear becomes not just a visitor, but a ruler. But fear can be useful if you refuse to serve it. Fear shows you where your growth lives. The Stoic studies his fear like a cartographer studies maps. He asks, what exactly am I afraid of? Is it failure, rejection, loss, death? And then he asks the next question. What would happen if that fear came true? He doesn't run from the image, he dwells in it. He imagines the worst, so he can remove its teeth. This practice, called premeditatio malorum, was the Stoic's weapon against panic. By imagining the worst-case scenario, you rob it of its surprise. You strip it of the power to paralyze you. Fear unexamined is terror. But fear examined is transformation. When you stop being afraid of fear, you stop being controlled by anything. And in that stillness, when the noise dies down, you begin to see clearly what matters and what was just illusion. Fear tells you that your peace lives outside of action. But the truth is, fear dies the moment action begins. You don't need to feel fearless to move forward. You just need to move. The rest burns away. The version of you who lives by fear will never meet the version of you who lives by power. One must die for the other to rise. If you've lived in fear long enough, then you know the cost. Missed chances, delayed dreams, a silent grave where your potential is buried. But if you're still here, watching, breathing, feeling, then you're ready to step forward into the fire, not away from it. And in the next chapter, we'll explore one of the most dangerous sources of overthinking: what other people think of you. This is the chain that shackles most men for life. But if you're ready to break it, because what's coming next isn't just freeing, it's violent. It's the destruction of the false self you've been forced to carry for years. And once you see it clearly, there's no turning back. We were not born with the fear of judgment. It was injected into us, drop by drop, by a world obsessed with appearances. Somewhere along the way, we stopped living for truth and started living for approval. We began to shape our thoughts, our words, our identities around the expectations of others. Parents, lovers, strangers, crowds that will forget us by tomorrow. And the tragedy is, we thought this made us stronger. We believed that the more accepted we were, the more real we became. But the Stoic knows that this is the greatest illusion of all. the belief that other people's opinions are worth more than your own conscience. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That's not rebellion, that's liberation. Because once you let go of needing to be understood, liked, or validated, you become terrifyingly free. You stop editing your soul to fit their preferences. You stop overthinking every word, every action, every look, because you're no longer playing a role. You're becoming real. Every time you overthink what someone might say about you, you hand them power over your peace. You build your own cage and beg them to lock the door. And even worse, you decorate the cage, post about it, pretend it's a palace. But deep down, you feel the weight. You know you're not living, you're performing. The Stoic rips the mask off. He chooses principle over popularity. He doesn't bend to trends, likes, or approval ratings. He walks into a room without needing to be the loudest because his silence is built from conviction, not insecurity. When you finally stop caring what others think, a brutal clarity awakens inside you. You no longer seek to impress. You seek to express what is right. And with that clarity comes speed. Decisions get easier. Speech becomes direct. Purpose hardens like armor. You become immune to flattery and indifferent to insults. They can't praise you into arrogance, and they can't shame you into silence. That is what the Stoic trains for. Not applause, but unshakable direction. So ask yourself, how many years have you wasted pretending to be someone palatable to people who never truly knew you? How many dreams have you delayed because they might not approve? How many thoughts have you strangled in your throat because they might misunderstand? If that number shakes you, then good. That means the truth is finally cracking through. But we're not stopping here, because the next chapter will take you deeper into the sacred silence that the Stoics revered. A silence so powerful, it doesn't just quiet your thoughts, it rewires your soul. It's not about avoiding the noise, it's about mastering stillness in the middle of it. Because once you enter that level of clarity, you don't come back the same. You come back dangerous. There is a kind of silence that isn't absence, it's presence. A stillness so heavy it humbles your chaos. Most people fear silence because they've never actually met themselves. They've built their lives on distraction, on noise, on constant motion, not because they're driven, but because they're scared of what will rise to the surface once everything stops. But the Stoic, he seeks out stillness like a warrior returns to his temple, not as retreat, but as restoration. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor surrounded by war, betrayal, and death, wrote nightly in his journal to return to that place of calm within. He wrote, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul." That is where the real war is won, not in the speeches, not in the conflict, but in the moments when the world expects you to panic and you do nothing. Except breathe, watch, wait. In a world that confuses movement for progress, the man who is still is mistaken for weak. But the Stoic knows stillness is not weakness. It is power in its purest form, because only the one who has mastered his inner noise can hear what truly matters. Stillness is what separates the reactive from the unstoppable. When you are still, overthinking dies, because thoughts only spin when they are fed. But when you become the observer, when you begin to watch your mind instead of being dragged by it, something ancient awakens. You begin to see where your fears are lies, where your emotions are manipulations, and where your choices have been guided by anything but truth. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You don't need to argue with your mind anymore. You don't need to silence the thoughts because they no longer command you. Stillness is the soil where discipline grows. It's where the Stoic plants the seeds of control, focus, and fortitude. No one talks about it because it's not glamorous. You can't show it off. But it's what separates the hollow from the whole. While others reach outward for clarity, the Stoic turns inward and builds a fortress the world can't shake. So if you're still here, it means the noise is beginning to lose its grip on you. And what comes next is the final blow to your old self. Because in the next and final chapter, we go where most never dare, into the practice of letting go, of what you thought you needed, of who you thought you were. It is the most terrifying and most freeing step. So subscribe now, because what's coming next isn't just knowledge, it's rebirth.